Hello, and welcome to SecureTalk, a podcast where we explore the critical world of information security innovation and compliance. I'm your host, Justin Beals, founder and CEO of StrikeGraph. Together with our expert guests, we'll provide you tools and tips to help your business thrive in the rapidly evolving cybersecurity environment. Our ability to use the internet is predicated on a really critical concept. It's the concept that we can keep information secret. Keeping information secret has been not just a computer issue, but an issue really throughout the ages of humanity, as certain topics or sensitive bits of information were meant to keep private from certain groups. And methods of communication in secret have been being designed and developed for centuries, if not millennia. Of course, our digital age and the amount of data that we push over the internet has brought a new level of importance to cryptography and encryption as a practice. And certainly as people that either develop software or are computer scientists more broadly, the concept of cryptography and the development of encryption technologies has allowed business to happen and comfortability in sharing personal information, and even being able to win a deal or create an outcome from a business perspective through your ability to keep information private and secure. A lot of our customers these days ask us how we keep data secure, and they want to know what type of cryptography and encryption we utilize. It's important to be able to talk to it both philosophically, conceptually, and technically. All difficult areas of discussion that require both a sense of the mathematics, a sense of the technical implementation characteristics, and a sense of what's expected broadly in the marketplace. Today, we have a deep expert in encryption joining us, someone that has written a number of books to help both lay people and those working in the computer science field to understand how encryption and cryptography works and why it's important. So please join me today in welcoming Panos Louridas. Panos is a professor in the Department of Management Science and Technology at the Athens University of Economics and Business. He's the author of 3 books, Real-World Algorithms, and Cryptography, all published by MIT Press. He is also the head of research and development at GRNet, which is responsible for designing, implementing, and deploying secure digital services used by millions of citizens in their dealings with the public sector in Greece. Please join me today in welcoming Panos to SecureTalk. Panos, thanks for joining us today on SecureTalk. We're really lucky to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
I have to say, I love your background. All my best work is done on something that I can erase. Whiteboard. That looks really exciting, though.
Actually, this is a wall. It's painted with a special paint, so we'll just use the wall.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. Well, one of the things we always like to ask our guests as we get to know them is, how did you become interested in computing? You know, were there any early experiences before your professional career that kind of got you enthralled with the work? Yeah.
It was mostly by accident, I guess. So I was, when I was young, I was a Boy Scout, about 12 years old. And then our adult team leader, she was a student and she was studying electrical engineering. And she had one of these, we're talking about the 80s. So she had this kind of home computers. It was the age of Commodore 64s and ZX Spectrums, this kind of machine. So she had a ZX Spectrum. And she had used it to show us how computers work. And I was kind of interested. And in one semester, during one semester, she had to work only on one of these big computers they had in the lab and not on his home computer. And he told me, would you like to have it for 6 months so that you can learn how to program? I said, yeah, why not? So she was kind enough to lend it to me. And, well, that was it. So that's how I learned programming and appreciating the whole stuff. Yeah.
Ah, that's brilliant. Yeah. I never got my Eagle Scout. I got as far as Life Scout, but I do think I had a computing merit badge somewhere along the way. Yes. I certainly, I had an Apple IIe, I think, or something when I was a kid. That was the
Ooh,
first one I got to play with. Yeah. But
fantastic.
it is intriguing, right? Like when you're like, oh, I can manipulate this thing in a lot of unique ways.
Much more interesting than just the games. So it's much more interesting than most people were doing it for games, but I thought, wait a minute,
Yeah.
this is more interesting than just playing here.
Yeah, I got interested in the game side, but then I think especially once we got networks, where you could
Yeah.
dial into a system, that changed things. I think the
Mhm.
way I viewed it, probably you as well. It looked very powerful.
I still remember the first time I got in a computer network.
Uh-huh.
And I still remember the moment it was really amazing when I realized, wait a minute, I'm not alone here. I can. It was amazing. I still remember I was sitting in a lab and then I discovered talking to other people around. Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had the old Prodigy network,
Hmm.
the early days when I was young. And then also, speaking of Commodore 64s, one of our favorite things to do was just hit phone numbers, see
Yes.
what had
Yes.
a tone to it. Yeah. um, you've recently written a brilliant book about cryptography. I had a chance to read it. It is really fun read,
Thank
actually.
you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Panos. Yeah. But there have been a lot of books about cryptography. I think about some of the Umberto Eco books that I've read, more fiction based back in the day,
Yeah.
about secrets and keeping them. What inspired you to write this particular book on cryptography?
Uh, well, that was the idea followed another book that I have written on algorithms, where what I wanted to do is to see if I could explain algorithms to somebody uh, who is a high school knowledge of mathematics and nothing else as a prerequisite.
Mm-hmm.
And after I did that, and well, the review for the algorithms book were very good and it was well received. I thought,
Yeah.
okay, perhaps cryptography, because it's something very, very important that affects every aspect of our lives. I had even written a chapter on cryptography when writing the algorithms book, because cryptography is about algorithms, at least modern
Yeah.
cryptography.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and So one part was that. The other part was, especially actually the younger generation, that all their lives is digital, and so it's permeated by cryptography, or it should be, if they want to have any sort of privacy or security. But most of them have very, very little idea of what is going on. And I think it should be a part of basic knowledge. Like at some part, for instance, we decided that, in high school, we teach basic stuff about electricity, biology. So in the same sense, right now, most people should have a knowledge of how the world works. And this includes cryptography. A modern world does not work without cryptography at all. So you
Yeah.
should have a basic knowledge of the stuff.
Yeah, I want to confess that as a software engineer building a lot of product over the year, I had almost no understanding of how it worked. I basically worked off the acronyms.
Yeah,
Someone
yeah,
told me, oh, you got to have AES implemented. It's port 8080.
yeah.
This is, it's a TLS 1.2. I remember the day someone was like, you can't use TLS 1.1 anymore. You better upgrade. And I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
what? Did we do this? Yeah. And so I agree. But I think even practitioners in the computer science field oftentimes don't know what it is that we're actually implementing.
They are not. I have also worked, and I'm still working as software engineer. So yes, you may be lucky enough to be building applications where cryptography is being taken care of. Well, for me, that was the situation. I think at a point, then I started doing work for applications for the citizens in my country, Greece. So we're creating applications for the citizens. So we're handling private data. And then suddenly everything becomes very, very important. Things that you were taking for granted, it turns out
Yeah.
that you cannot take for granted anymore. So that's
Yeah.
how it also affected my programming life as well.
And broadly, even those not in the computer science field, and I agree with you, the internet couldn't work if we couldn't keep data private, who we want to talk to. It would be a total mess. And so it is a fundamental key to allowing the network to work at all.
Particularly since the internet was not designed to be secure in the sense that we mean security today. It was built by academics. In the beginning, there was just a few nodes. Everybody knew each other. So it was just a bunch of folks who everybody knew everybody. And then when it expanded, security had to be added on top. And that is also something very interesting. How can you create something that is secure based on something that's fundamentally not secure? Because it was never thought or designed to be secure to begin with. So it's very interesting how you can make this happen with cryptography.
Yeah, I mean, my early days on IP addresses with a network were library networks, right? I don't think we didn't even have a concept of identity other than an email address on a listserv, and all that was in plain text, very open. Yeah. I think there's an academic bend towards that, right? Like we want to share ideas and drive concepts forward and learn from each other as we're developing.
Yes, even historically, the commercial use came afterwards. And yes, we wanted to share things. And this also is interesting how sharing happens in cryptographic ideas. That I guess you remember that it was even impossible to export cryptographic stuff, at least some kind of stuff, from the United States to Europe. There were these funny stories about the books coming over here without the CDs. Well, back then you put code on CDs. And Bruce Schneier books would come here without the CD in Europe. And so it was completely to be scanned. And so all these funny stories about how we can move these ideas around.
Yeah. Well, one thing I definitely have learned about security broadly, and especially cryptography, is that it's often called a real arms race, right? Like somebody wants to keep something secret, they design a modality to keep it secret, and then someone wants to learn those secrets because information has value, and so they break into it. And of course, this has been going on for millennia plus, a lot longer than just computing. And you highlight a couple of the this arms race in more classical terms. I'm curious, do you have a favorite example from your classical stories of where someone created a secret modality and then that secret modality was solved for by a hacker?
Well, there's so many nice stories. Well, I think it's difficult not to talk about Enigma because it is such an important part of the world effort in World War II, and also so many important people were involved in different countries. And even today, it's a matter of pride for the countries that were involved. So as it happens, as a nice coincidence, just this week I was in Poland, and in Poland there is a city called Poznan. And in Poznan, it was the head of the Cipher Bureau in Poland between the two wars, between the first and the second, for a certain, not for the whole period, for part of the period. And it was there that they started trying to tackle the Enigma. And it were three Polish cryptographers, cryptanalysts who worked in Poznan. And they were the first ones who designed a machine that would help them to break the code. And today they have built a fantastic museum in the city that highlights the history because they are so proud of it, and it's even part of their national identity that they could do that, and they contributed to the world effort. So it's a nice story that it flows into today. So the museum is very nice. So if somebody goes to Portland, I really recommend it. And I understood also that it's popular for school visits because it has great educational material. So I was there with a school that were visiting there. And I was very happy to see the young kids going through the exhibits and seeing how the various crypto mechanisms work and explaining the importance of cryptanalysis, especially modern cryptanalysis. They do they highlight, and this is also important in Enigma, that it was probably the first time that very serious mathematics was used in the analysis of the machine. And also it was the first time that a machine was built in order to beat another machine. And from
Yeah.
then on, it's never the same.
Yeah, it does represent a milestone, right? Like
Yeah,
we went from into machine. It was the dawn of kind of the machine era and
yeah,
secrets.
yeah,
Yeah. And of course there's some amazing characters in that story.
yeah,
Back to Babbage and
yeah, yeah,
Lovelace,
yeah,
through
yeah, yeah,
to Turing and then, designing parallel processing in a way and information science. It is, we got some great movies out of it these
yeah.
days.
And
Yeah.
the story goes on even now with the effort for the standards for post-quantum algorithms for cryptography that it was found out that one of the approaches is actually very vulnerable. And this
Mm.
was, it happened in the last couple of years. So scientists, very serious scientists who were working on very, very deep mathematics to create something that is secure. It was found that in the end it was not. So this arms race, it's still going on. It's not going to finish. So you see it happening even now in front of our eyes.
Yeah, only accelerating, I think, that
Yeah.
this race in a way. You used two terms that really helped me. I appreciate it because I was probably using them poorly in my own lexicon. Cryptography is the act of making something secret or creating a modality to make it secret. And cryptoanalysis, the act of trying to solve that
Yeah.
secrecy or hack it, as we
Yeah.
might use in our
Yeah.
modern parlance. Yeah. So, um, uh, one of the things that I found interesting as you were giving examples both towards the modern era and the more recent era is a lot of times the solution, the cryptoanalysis of a cryptography problem is a really obtuse way of coming at it, right? It's almost like a blind spot from the person that designed the cryptography in the first place. Cribbing,
Yeah.
statistical analysis of language. None of these things were part of the initial design. Yeah.
Yes. So it takes it takes a lot of creativity actually to hit upon this idea that, and actually some of these took centuries. For instance,
Hmm.
frequency analysis for polyalphabetic ciphers like the visionary cipher took centuries for somebody to realize with some a creative leap of mind that, you could use frequency analysis even though initially it doesn't seem to work in these polyalphabetic ciphers if only you notice this, and then you transform the problem in something that is amenable to what you know.
Mm-hmm.
This was something that I found very creative, that somebody realized that. And the same thing happens again and again. Somebody will find a blind spot and zero in and so I guess that's also why people like to do it. Well, people like solving problems and challenges, and cryptography is like the ultimate challenge in a sense.
Yeah. I
Or
mean, to this
cryptanalysis.
day,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
we have, there's all kinds of, I think, cultural phenomena where people hide a treasure or we have some puzzle to solve. We love that type of thing. Yeah. And it does work that way. It's also, I found, I love the word creativity in this work because it's like the crypto analytics work was about reimagining the secret in the context that the secret operated, like frequency analysis, how many
Hmm.
E's are in the
Yeah.
words that we
Yeah.
use, for example. And that, I think that broadens the whole field. It improves it in a way, both the secrets we want to make secret and the way we think about securing them.
Yeah. Also, even things that fall outside, let's say, traditional cryptanalysis, like side channel attacks. Like somebody thought that from the sound of the operations in your computer, somebody would be able to deduce what's going. So this is really clever.
Yeah.
Once you've been told, it sounds obvious. Of course, yeah. But somebody had to think of it that you could use heat dissipation or sound waves, all of the magnetic waves, and figure out the calculations. This is also a leap of imagination. And it
Yeah.
sidesteps
Yeah.
the whole mechanism. So it's a way to go around the whole mechanism and attack it in a completely novel way. Yeah.
I feel for the cryptographer side because they're like, no, it's against the rules. You can't go at it that way. Yeah.
Well, that's true. Like, whoa, we designed this and it's nice and mathematically so elegant, and then suddenly you come along and with this hardware thing, for instance, and you break everything up. Yeah,
Yeah,
no
that's
rules.
hard.
Yeah.
There was something that I learned in your book that was excellent for me to learn. And when I think about a lot of the people that I talk to in cybersecurity, I see a really common practice where part of the way that they think about making a system secure is achieved by hiding the state of the system or even the system's existence. Can you help describe for us the fallacy of security by obscurity?
Well, first of all, yeah, let's take it the other way around. What would you trust? Something that you know it is secure even though everybody knows how it works and everybody has tried to attack it, or just because it's a black box? So I think that if you ponder a minute on it, you realize that yeah, something that everybody has tried to attack and break and they know how it works and still they have not managed to break it, it's much better than something that it's only a black box, and so it could be secure, it could not be, but we don't really know. So the first one is security by obscurity. Um, it gives you less information on which to base your confidence.
Mm-hmm.
If something is open, you have more information. You know how it works, you know the principles, and you know that many, many clever people, much more clever people than I am, and most, even geniuses, have tried to break it, and they have not. So you place your trust in this collective effort to prove security. Second, security by obscurity is exactly it's founded on the idea that the design is secret, but this is also something that has to do with people, and people are very bad for keeping secrets. So how do you know that the design has not been leaked or sold? Even the Enigma that we talked before, the designs of the Enigma were leaked from Germany.
Yeah.
So people will always, there will always be weak links among people. So if you just place your trust that this is a secret design, how do you know that the design is secret? You cannot.
Right.
So it's an assumption that you cannot prove at all in the first place.
Mm-hmm. There's a certain amount of hubris to it as well. Like, I know best security. I know how to design it, and I'm going to keep that secret.
Yes, and if it's so damn good, then why don't you let us know about it? Are you so certain?
Yeah.
It's exactly as you say, hubris. Perhaps for me, it would look more like lack of confidence. Are you really so confident? Then bring it on.
Yeah. Okay, so first off, I want to highlight one of the things I loved about your book is that you kind of move through the history of cryptography, although light on the classical stuff, which I appreciated. We got into the more modern computing ideas around cryptography fairly quickly. But you do tell a story about the early days of developing cryptographic tools around DES. And I think it highlights this issue of the hubris. And so I have to jump to a question that was just in my mind as reading the book. The NSA in the United States was involved in helping create DES. Do you think that the NSA hobbled DES as an encryption technique?
Well, we don't know. I don't know if there is something in some archives that will be declassified during our lifetimes or after our lifetime, so we may never know. If I were NSA, would I try to put such a backdoor? It's very tempting. Probably, you say that, my allegiance is if my allegiance were to the NSA, then it's to the NSA agenda. And if the NSA agenda is to be able to intercept, then, so I don't know. I have reasons to suspect that it is so because it is so tempting. But of course, that doesn't mean that everything that comes out from the government or the military is bad. For instance,
Right.
the Tor network that we use for the Tor browser, something that came out
Yeah.
from the US Navy. Most people don't know that, and it's because spies wants to be able to be anonymous. So it's not necessary that everything is developed by a three-letter agency is flawed or insecure.
Yeah. I mean, DES was also kind of designed in a little bit of a closed source environment as much as an open source environment. So that has given us, and we saw that DES later on, as more computing power became available, was crackable.
Yeah.
I mean, even the simple decision, like I could imagine being in the government we have the most powerful computers. Because we built them in the Navy. We've been trying to, do weather for centuries now.
Yeah.
We're gonna build this encryption technique just up to the limit of commercial computing, but
Exactly.
not yet to the limit. And you wouldn't have to hobble it or backdoor it at all. You just knew that the mathematical function for cracking it was something you might have the tools for. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially exactly as you say, because the separation between commercial and military was quite, we even had in the GPS until recently. So it was like you have these dual users, and the military has access to more powerful hardware and resources than you have now. It's not so much anymore. But back then, yes, it was something that they could leverage.
Yeah. So we've now had AES, and it was approved by the National Institute of Science and Technology in 2001. So we've had AES for a while. It's been a couple of decades. How do you think it's holding up, Panos, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's holding on pretty well. Even with advancing quantum computing, we don't know of any fundamental attacks against AES. The only we know that the time to break it would be, let's say, half or something like that. So you can just increase the key. So then this is the actual recommendation. So instead of using, let's say, 120 bits, you could use 256. And I think that's something that we can keep doing as long as not a completely different kind of attack or a quantum algorithm is found. So I think it has to, it's in pretty good shape. I think we just keep increasing the size of the key, and it's something that we can do computationally. It's not prohibitive. So for the time being,
I thought one of the things that was interesting to me about AES as a design, and your book does a great job of explaining this, is it's kind of a multifaceted process. It uses a couple of techniques to obfuscate the data or encrypt the data in layers, and I think that's helpful from a cryptography perspective.
Yeah, it's all this kind. Well, if you see it at a basic level, it's a lot of slicing and dicing and mixing. So you take your data and you slice it, dice it, you mix it, and again. But then the clever stuff is that, but it's not just you don't just do it randomly. It's done in a very, very clever way. So you cannot, because basically what you do is you take your message and you make it look random. And one of the basic things, you cannot make something look random just randomly. You have to be very serious about how you do it. I think it was Donald Knuth that said that in one of his books, that you cannot design an random generator randomly or something like that. It's the same thing with cryptography. You cannot hide your message just like that. You have to be very, very serious.
Generating randomness is incredibly hard. I think nature doesn't even enjoy it that much broadly. This might be just a legend and not true, but I think there's a fairly large cybersecurity company that tries to generate randomness out of lava lamps, a wall of lava lamps, and tracking the movement of fluid.
Yes, it's exactly. And there is actually now people try to use quantum effects, so quantum computing, to generate random numbers. Actually, in Greece, we are planning a project to do that, because we also need to be able to have access to certifiably random numbers. So one approach is to use, well, one could use quantum approach to do that, and we're working on that. So it's something that, yes, it is necessary. Not many people realize how difficult it is to create something random. As you said, yeah, even nature doesn't like that. So
Yeah, yeah. We're here. Let's talk about quantum computing and cryptography a little bit. How I'm afraid to ask this question, Panos, but do you have an idea? What do you think the timeline is like for something like AES in a quantum computing world? You could give me 5 to 10 years. I think quantum computing is going to have an impact on our ability to keep secrets, or you can say, no, I think we're pretty solid for a while.
well, I think it's certainly more than 5 years before
Yeah.
we have. So yeah, progress is made, but I think it's definitely more than 5 years. Perhaps it's even 10 years before it becomes a serious problem. There are still technical issues to be resolved, but at the same time, well, in the meantime, we do work on these post-quantum cryptographic methods
Right.
because one of the problem is that there might be sensitive data that people store them today in order to decrypt them, let's say after 10 years or 20 years.
Yeah.
So so you must be able to know that the method that you are using will be safe even in the future. And that's a very interesting problem. And there are people working on that. So how can we migrate our data that are already encrypted is something that is going to be secure also in the future. It's good that people are aware of the problem and they're working on it because I think we have enough time to prepare ourselves before we have any real threat from quantum computing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a little spooky, but when I read about the hardware and where it's at and the error correction issues that we're dealing with in quantum computing, you know, I do think there is a little bit of time, but the legacy question exists. One thing that I learned reading your book, which I loved, is I found it really interesting that, especially in modern cryptography, computing based, that one of the major faults is also fundamental to its functions. And of course, I should have known this, but your book helped highlight it for me. But you know, there's a relationship between the content of the message and the language it's written in, and we can use frequency analysis. There's a relationship between the key, if we're doing the symmetrical type encryption, and the encrypted message itself. And a lot of times these mathematical relationships necessary to encrypt and decrypt are also used to crack, you know, the encryption tool. And so part of the challenge in cryptography is the tools we use to encrypt it in the first place.
Yeah. Essentially, the problem is that you want a transformation from something to something else that goes only one way, and you cannot go back because encryption is one way, and you cannot go back unless you have something extra like the key.
Yeah.
And talking more generally, this kind of one-way functions, they may not even exist. So it's an assumption that to the best of our current knowledge, these functions, because these transformations that you mentioned, these mappings from the original language to the encrypted message, all these mappings essentially are functions that to the best of our current mathematical knowledge, they are one way. But that's also what I always repeat to my students. The key here is to the best of our current mathematical knowledge. We cannot be 100% sure. They have not been proven. They are just assumptions. We are pretty confident that they are safe assumptions.
Yeah.
But we cannot be sure.
You know, this is a big debate, not just in computer science, but physics, mathematics, right? Like we can do the Laplace's demon type analysis and be like, if we knew, you know, a certain space, then we could predict with high confidence about how that was going to evolve, or the entropy of a system. Although then it starts getting really esoteric with quantum things where we can understand where something is, but not where it's going. But I think in a number of different scientific areas, we've been trying to test our human knowledge around this and our assumptions. One-way algorithms, for example. Yeah.
Yes. it's yes, well, it expands. So it's the same idea of what we know or what we have proved. So a lot of things that have to do with cryptography have to do with the complexity of doing things. So
Hmm.
we go to the theory of computation, which is how do you know that some problems are really hard to solve? And again, there's a whole class of problems called NP-complete that we believe that they cannot be solved efficiently, that there are no efficient algorithms to solve them, but we
Yeah.
have not proved them. It's one of, if not the biggest problem in theoretical computer science. If somebody can prove that, yes, they cannot be solved efficiently.
Yeah.
So you see this thread about the limits of our knowledge, what can be computed, what can be reversed. It's all of it is kind of related if you take if you look at it spherically, all of it's kind of related.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to pull me out of my philosophy a little bit back to earth here.
Mhm.
One of the things that I had a question for you, Panos, about is essentially the practice of key management in modern web applications that we develop.
Okay.
Um, I'm constantly being asked, like, what's your key rotation policy, or how are you handling keys? Talk to us a little bit about what problems we're trying to solve there with this activity.
Okay. So, well, the basic problem is that for somebody to attack you, they must have some access to encrypted messages. So, if you have only
Hmm.
one encrypted message, it's very difficult to decrypt it. Okay, if it's just one. And this is also the kind of the problem with some of the historical problems in cryptography, like the Zodiac or the Voynich manuscripts. That these are kind of one-offs. So you
Yeah.
have very, very limited material on which to base your decryption efforts. So if you're using the same key for a long time, well, you get more and more material encrypted, and somebody might intercept it, and uh, they have more to work on in order to
Oh,
decrypt. So
yeah.
the idea is how to minimize this. So you rotate your keys so they don't have the chance to accumulate a lot of encrypted material with which to attack you.
Mm,
Now the question is exactly as you said, what is the rotation? Well, also a lot of times actually we work with what is called ephemeral keys, so they last only for one session. So anyway, they
mm,
don't last long. Otherwise, yes, you must have a policy of rotating them. Uh, how how frequent is good enough. Then, if it's too frequent, it might start impractical. That's also there's also always a trade off between security and cost. So you can increase
mm.
the security, but it's more costly, even mentally costing. And talking about key rotation, think about how annoying it is when you visit some of the websites that ask you every now and then to reset your password.
Yeah.
And if it's too often, after the third or fourth time, you start, okay, do I really have to do that? Can I use a previous one? Or can I just...
Yeah.
So even on the human level, it starts getting a bit problematic. So there's a
Hmm.
fine balance.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a good idea to rotate keys and not keep them forever. On the other hand, you cannot rotate them all the time because yes, somehow something will break along the way.
Yeah. I do get though that, like, especially with the amount of data we ship on the internet, I can allow a lot of encrypted data to be available for someone to collect
Yes,
quite quite rapidly, in a month or two,
of course.
listening on the
Yeah.
right port. We're pushing encrypted data over the open internet on some level. We think the encryption keeps it secret as it goes, but with that amount of data, all of a sudden they have more information to do analysis against it, and the
Mhm.
system becomes easier to crack. Yeah. Um, okay, I have another one for you. I've implemented AES and TLS on a bunch of different web applications, but I swear to this day, I don't understand very well the relationship between the two of them. Help us understand where AES sits and TLS sits
Okay,
with each other.
so TLS uh, is a protocol. It means the way two parties will agree on how to encrypt the communication. So
Ah,
if so, uh, let's say when we started talking here, if our video link and our audio link is encrypted, my computer will have to agree with your computer on how to do that.
mhm.
So we start by exchanging messages like which first, which protocols, which cryptographic algorithms do you support? So you
Mhm.
support, your computer might support some algorithms, my computer will support some other algorithms. So TLS establishes this common understanding. So which algorithms are going to use for encryption? And then, again, AES is symmetric encryption, so it means that we need a common key. So TLS will also take care of that. So it will decide on the key exchange mechanism that we are going to use so that we will share a common key. And after that, we can start using AES. And this is when the actual communication begins in earnest. So TLS, if you can think it's the preamble, like when two people meet on a dance floor or something, and then you have this kind of preliminaries. So the interactions, who are you? What are you doing? This is TLS. And then communication can start get going through, for instance, AES.
Exceptional. That's very helpful. Thanks. So I wanted to just open up a question to the future of this space a little bit, Panos. We talk about quantum computing. I think that's the thing we talk about a lot with cryptography and where this arms race is going. Are there other vectors that we should be aware of that you don't think we concern ourselves with?
Well, it's all very good and admirable, but I'm also working on projects that have to do with post-quantum cryptography. From the practical point of view, I'm not a theoretical person. I'm working on projects using this technology.
Yeah.
What I think we should always be aware of and take care of, actually, is people. I mean, I would not care to attack somebody by attacking using a quantum machine. I would just do social engineering. I'm sure it will be much more successful. So raising awareness, and I hope that's also a goal of the book, raising awareness to people is important.
Yeah.
As I told you, I work in developing services for the citizens. You would be surprised how often if you work in this area, you would get emails from citizens saying, "Oh, the system does not work. Please, here's my username and password. Please help me."
Yeah.
So people will give out their secrets even without asking them. It's amazing. So
yeah.
And then you have to tell them, no. I don't want your username. I don't want your password. Okay, let's come to the beginning. Yeah, people are the weakest link. Like mathematics is perfect. You can prove it. Algorithms, yes, you can also prove them. Implementation software, more difficult. We can not really prove that software is correct. Or in some cases, formal methods, not really. But when you add people in the mixer, that's the problem. So what we always will have to think about is educating people and making them aware of the choices they make on how they use technology.
Absolutely. And I have to give praise to your book. I didn't do very good in mathematics in grade school. I blame my teacher, of course, because it can't be my fault. And in college, I studied theater, and I took a mathematics class called Mathematics for the Liberal Arts, which
fantastic. Wow, it's so
I know,
great.
I loved
Wow.
it. Yeah. Because I realized when I think back to my old algebra 2 that if only my teacher had said to me, "Hey, Justin, the reason we're doing these polynomials is that we're trying to define an arc in space," I would have been like, "How intriguing. I am so interested in how to describe curves." That's very interesting. And what I loved about the book is that it is information science. It is mathematics and algorithmic in a way, the cryptography we do. But I felt like the math was very approachable for me, and I could understand it on a more fundamental level and how it worked. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad. One of the things, well, you cannot do it for all kinds of mathematics, but one of the things that I have realized is certain things that they look very forbidding when you look at the mathematical formula. In the end, when you explain the basic idea, it is not. So it looks on paper like, wow, what is that? And how do I decipher it as a human being? Sometimes I have difficulty, like, what if
Mhm.
I see too many symbols here and too many subscripts and what, so that they don't make sense and too many Greek characters. Well, at least I'm Greek, so the Greek characters, you know,
They make sense.
yes. So it must
That's
be
not
even worse.
fair, Panos.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it must be even worse for you. Okay. For me, at least that part is okay. Uh, and then when you think of it, say, wait, yeah, but fundamentally it's something very simple. It's just that when you formalize, it becomes obtuse. So, and this was one of the things that I'm trying to show in the book, that some of the, or a lot of the things are not that difficult to understand at a fundamental level.
Yeah. They're not that difficult to understand. And I think that's where we see elegant mathematics, right? Like
Yeah.
when I think when we describe something as very elegant or a formula we really like, it's because it's simple and easy to communicate and highly repeatable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, Panos, I am going to give your book to all my software engineers so that they understand how cryptography works. Because
Oh,
sometimes I
thank you.
wonder if they do. Yeah, but I'm very grateful for the work. We'll have the title of the book and a link to it in the show notes here for our listeners, and
Thank
also
you.
really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today.
No, thank you for the invitation. I really enjoyed the discussion with you. And well, I hope people find the book interesting.
I certainly did.